right. I'm here with Isa. Isa, welcome to Automate All the Things. How are you today?
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
How
So
are you?
I'm good. It's funny because Isa is Canadian Russian, I guess, or speaks Russian anyway. So maybe we can do Привет, Isa, как дела сегодня?
Ну, все отлично.
There we
А
go.
как твои?
So хорошо. So we're not going to do the whole thing in Russian, but welcome to Automate All Things. I'm really excited to have you. You are the founder of Fintable, which actually I'll let you introduce Fintable. Maybe that's a good place to start. How about we start by introducing Fintable and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, the thing I love about Fintable is that can be summarized in one sentence. It syncs your bank accounts to to Airtable, and that's it, basically. Um, so this is the kind of tool that if you use Airtable, you kind of get it, and if you don't, that sentence probably makes very little sense to you. But basically, it started off because I used to work as an Airtable consultant, and I helped entire businesses move off of custom built software or a whole lot of code, basically, just onto a couple of Airtable bases, which were properly integrated with the rest of the ecosystem. And so my last example was actually Seaside Tours, um, Canada's largest tour agency. So they used to serve, at least before the pandemic, tens of thousands of customers every month. And their entire warehouse scheduling of tours, bookings, all that stuff I moved it off from very expensive custom platforms basically onto a full Airtable based workflow. And financial transactions were a huge part of that as well. But at that time, there was no solution for that. But anyway, so being a person who loved Airtable, and I decided I wanted to manage my own personal finances there. This was when I was kind of traveling the world a little bit, and I had like all sorts of different bank accounts and currencies. Um, and at first, I was just manually inputting my balances there and managing my finances just like a standard budgeting app.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, hey, what would happen if I could sync stuff automatically here, sync my balances and transactions? I don't just click a button and I want to see where I'm at for the day.
Yeah.
And I looked up I thought, come on, there's got to be somebody who's done this already. And it turns out not for Airtable, but for Google Sheets, yes. And it turns out there is a huge market for people who want to manage their own finances in a spreadsheet. So I thought, hey, let's do this. And the response has been totally different from what I expected. I thought, oh, people who love Airtable are going to love to do their personal finances in here. But my first shock was actually when I just sent an email to people who just signed up to the landing page, and then I think about 20% of the people immediately bought the pre-sale, and that's what told me it was only a small email list.
Right.
It was less than a couple hundred, but that just told me, wow, okay, so people really want this. But I didn't really understand why, because there's a million other budgeting apps out there, and I wanted to understand what the use case was. So I launched it and people started to use it. And my first example of a bug or an error that happened was that it broke the system just because I hadn't prepared for multi-million dollar values in the
So let me. I know we talked about this, and I want to kind of frame it for folks. So what you were expecting was like, folks like Sean, myself, like hobbyists of like, oh, I have an Airtable account. Let me get my transactions into it. What you noticed was like people were like, no, actually, like multi-million dollar, like big businesses, if you will, were wanting to sync information into Airtable, transact like I don't want to say that what Sean and I do isn't real, but like we're not dealing with if I don't know where the transaction come from, doesn't really matter, right? I could be like, whatever. But if a company doesn't know, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing businesses of like, I need to know what the ins and outs of our accounts are because I have workflows around those.
Yes, also where I would put it. So Fintable is most valuable to people who already have data in Airtable and they
Right.
need to connect data to that. Doesn't matter whether you're personal or business.
Got it.
You have other kinds of information that's important to you in your Airtable, and you need to connect that to your transactions. And there's just no other way to do it. Well, unless you do it manually, and which is in fact what some businesses were doing. So What are the potential use cases for this? I've just learned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a learning experience for me to see how people use Fintable. The personal finance use case is great. We have a couple of like family offices and like high net worth individuals, which I'm definitely not going to expose here, but they manage some pretty large accounts in some weird countries as well, Swiss bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, they go to lengths to protect their their financial data, but then it goes straight to Airtable after that because at the end of the day, they want a way to get an all-in-one view of
Mm-hmm.
their data, and no custom
Right.
budgeting app works for it.
Awesome. So I'd love to know in the chat, like, I'd love to know if I know we have some freelancers who join very often, small businesses, folks on the more personal side. Let me know, what you would like to do. Like, we're going to start with more of a personal, like, how do we just sync the transactions? And then we'll do a few workflows around like flagging potentially important transactions or triggering workflows. But as we're going to jump in here in just a moment, I'd love to know in the chat what is like a use case that you're interested in, whether that's credit card transactions, whether that's I'm a freelancer and I want to track invoices to transfers, which I'm sure is a pain, right? If someone has a payment schedule. So let us know in the chat. I'm going to keep that in mind. But with that, Isa, are we kind of ready to jump in and start automating?
Yep, the best way is to just show you how it works, and it's pretty simple actually.
Awesome. So
Let's
I'm going
do
to
it.
go ahead and share my screen with you. This is a little bit of a, so you should be able to see my screen. And now folks on the stream should also see my screen. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that's the case. Let me know. There we go. So there's a question from Penny. Can we track stock investments? So we'll get that. We'll get that in just a moment. We've got Sean categorizing income expenses for consulting business. Collect receipts and file tax at the end of the year. So you've got quite a wide, or some people want to track stocks or probably, sale of stocks in and out of their bank accounts. We've got folks doing taxes and filing, so we can incorporate like a date, right? So quarter, we can talk about that as well and how Airtable can create those kinds of reporting functionality. Okay, so really appreciate that in the chat. Keep it going. If at any moment you guys have questions, that's why you come live, is you get the value of having the founder and potentially an Airtable user expert, I don't know, helping you out and getting. So I'm here in the template, right? And I actually think a better place to start, Isa, is on fintable.io's dashboard. Is that right?
That's good. Yep.
Okay, so let me actually go back to Fintable. I've already logged in here, so I'm just going to log in, and I'm brought to kind of my dashboard. So talk to me a little bit about how Fintable works, if you will, of like, how do I connect my bank account? How do we go from those bank account transactions into Airtable? I don't want to say the word backend, but not being technical, but what is the process of getting the transactions into my base?
Right. So basically, there's two things to set up: your banks and your Airtable.
Right.
So the Airtable is fairly simple. I guess we can start with that. The banks can be a little bit more of a pain, but we'll get to that. So basically, all you need to do is figure out how to. You need to have an Airtable, and you need to identify it, and then pass over your API keys so that Fintable can connect to it. So let's try disconnecting this and connecting it.
Okay. So copy template, that's what I did here, right? So we already have the template, and then connect Airtable. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Base ID. So for folks who aren't, actually, let me go through the process here. Base ID is in your help. Now this has moved a little bit. It used to be a dropdown. Now you can go to API documentation. So every single Airtable base has a base ID, and your API is at the account level. But to know which base Fintable should sync to, you need to have your base ID. So let me go into here, and it's this one right here. So in the URL, let me know if you can see that. Boom.
Well, there, the ID.
Oh, it's right here. Right, it's right here. Boom. Let's go to Fintable, base ID, API key. That's at the account level. I have mine in Alfred. There we go. And then just match the names of the tables, right? Accounts, transactions. Yeah. Great. And I imagine if I take the template, those are already all done for me.
Yes. So accounts and transactions is the default name, but if for some reason you want to customize the name of those tables, you can just change it there.
Awesome. Uh, awesome. Okay.
That's
Let me close my. I don't want people to know I have that many unread emails. It's really bad. I'm sorry. I know it stresses people out. It doesn't stress me out. So okay. So let's save that. So this is saying, okay, this account is tied to that template or to that base. That way we could incorporate it.
right. Did you click save?
Did I click save? I think so. The joys of working live. Isa is great because I got the right person to get this to work. So should I refresh? Should we give it a second? What do you think?
Yeah, let's give it.
Let's give it a second. Boom. Whew. Stressful, right?
So the reason that takes a few seconds right now because it does more than just connect. What it does is actually checks each and every column in your Airtable
Right.
and make sure that it's named properly and it's of the right type.
Right.
So if for example if for example you're dealing with multiple currencies, you're going to have to create new columns for those currencies.
Right.
If for some reason you renamed a column which was required by Fintable, it'll let you know there.
Yeah. So just a note, those little stars, right, are kind of those required fields. So if you're starting off from scratch, recommend pulling. This is what you told me, right? You pull in the template, sync once, and then create fields is probably easier than having to like add fields before you get data in there.
Yes, but unless you have the Airtable app. So it's not released on the App Store yet, but if you have the Airtable app, there's a button which will automatically create the fields for you.
Okay,
so
great.
that's more useful when you already have an Airtable base and you just want to integrate Fintable into it rather than start from scratch.
Okay, so I'll leave in the description once we get the marketplace link. So for folks watching this later, I'll add it, and that way folks can also kind of download the app as well directly into the Airtable base. So we're kind of going from template. So from here, so I've got the template hooked up. Where do I go from here?
So the next thing to do is connect your banks. If at any point you're wondering whether your Airtable is set up properly, you can always click the recheck button. That'll just that'll do that.
Okay, awesome.
Check of all
I've got quite a few. Do we want to disconnect and do it one more time?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. Boom. So Sean, this is a test account, but I think you're at my level. You've got 9 accounts connected as well, which is quite impressive. While this, like, tell us, when you say connect to a bank, what does this mean? Like, are you going to see all of my accounts? Like, talk to me a little bit about what's going to happen a little bit behind the scenes when we connect to this data source.
Yeah. So what Fintable will do is, so first of all, Fintable has no direct access to any of the banks that we connect to. Instead, we use global bank data providers. So when you click the Connect to Bank button, if you click there, right now we're partnered with 3 different providers. One is, as you can see, Plaid, which is probably the most famous in the United States, which was supposed to be owned by Visa, but that got canceled. Finicity, which is owned by MasterCard. And in the UK and Europe, you have TrueLayer. So these are the providers which actually handle your bank credentials. Fintable never actually has any access to this, and that's the standard way that fintech startups usually work. The only thing that we do have access to is we do have access to your transaction data, which is the amounts, because we need that in order to sync it to Airtable.
Right.
It first gets synced to Fintable databases, and then it gets synced to Airtable.
Awesome. So I'm going to go with Plate because that's the one I know, and I know that it works. So I think we can just connect to a test account. So if you can kind of search for your bank, imagine, Sean, you didn't have any trouble. Let us know in the chat if you had trouble, if you tried it and had trouble connecting. Now's a good time because you've got the founder here at Automate All the Things, and we could put some pressure on him. But in most cases, you should be able to like search for your bank. I mean, I'm an RBC, right? And it was here, and there's a bunch of others. I think we're just going to go with Chase as a test. So what is the user ID and password here that I need to put in?
For the testing, it's user_good, PASS_good, pass_good.
Okay, awesome. So pass_good. Okay, and what this is going to go do is like go get all of those accounts within Chase and allow you to pull in the transactions, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And it takes a minute or so to connect these. You'd be amazed. I mean, bank data providers, it's It's funny because you know how this actually works in the United States and Canada. So the bank data provider pretends to be you, opens up basically like a Google Chrome
Right.
instance, logs in, and then scrapes the data. In the Europe, it's different because banking providers are required by law to provide an API. So
Right.
anyway,
Uh,
once you've connected, the only thing that you're gonna have to configure here is if whether you want to enable or disable any accounts. So let's go ahead and disable the 401k,
sure.
for example, or the money.
Sure. There we go. Okay. So,
By default, Fintable only syncs the last 30 days of transactions, but you can change the sync start date to as much as 24 months in advance.
okay. So now we're syncing January, April. Okay. So we already have a month. So let's give maybe one account an extra month. That way we can have like different months. But for the rest, let's keep it from. And do I need to sync or is it happening already?
Oh no, you'll have to start the sync. So you see the start sync button or read the last sync button, either one
This
works.
one?
Uh, yeah, so start sync and redo last sync are the same thing.
Okay.
Or we should make that more.
Okay. Boom.
That one, no.
Oh, start sync. There's a big button. Okay, that was me. That was me being an idiot. Sorry. Okay, I promise this is like we're clicking here, but I do want to show you all how easy this was. And I come from somewhere where like I did the same thing with Tiller Money. So if someone could find that video and drop it in the chat, like I had it in a sheet and then I used Parabola to get the transaction ID and then pull it back into my Airtable base. And what's shocking about that is people did it, right? So people actually came to me and were like, oh, I'm using your workflow. And I was like, there's no way people will do this. So the fact that we went through it and in, I think what was 11 minutes, got it all set up is like a lot of joy for me. So right now it's like, it's pulling in all of those automatically right from the start date.
Right. Yeah, if you open the Airtable right now accounts tab, you'll see the accounts coming in one by one.
Okay, great. Wow. Okay. So I do want to, now's actually a good time to talk about the question around stocks. So you don't have visibility into ownerships of those accounts. You have visibility into balances. Is that right?
Basically, yes. So we do have a connection with Coinbase, Fidelity.
Okay, are we back? Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me? I think so. Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Oh, we're back. Okay, well, Murphy's Law. My power went out, and this happens once every year, I think. But we're back. So let me know in the chat if y'all can see everything. Isa, I'm going to share my screen with you again. And we're going to get this show back on the road. Okay, we're all good. We're all good. Okay, whew. Whew, that was, got me sweating there. It's a good workout. Okay, so
Quite a bit, actually, because it takes about a minute for all the transactions to appear in Airtable, but I think it should have appeared by now.
okay, great. So this was all planned. Okay, so if we go back to transactions, okay, we've got all of our transactions from all of our different accounts. So I think now's a good time to kind of like look through and understand what each one, not each field, but just get a sense of what this does. And then we'll create like a dashboard for what a lot of folks wanted, which was like personal management, right? And then from there, we'll go into how to like do workflows around transactions. So screen seems blurry. Let me know if that's fixed. I can zoom in to make it a little less blurry. I think it's just my kind of Wi-Fi is struggling here as everyone's reconnected, but it should be good to go. Cool. Okay. So Isa, talk to me a little bit how I should understand this base and the kind of transaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's very bare bones, actually. You have the transaction description as it appears on your bank statement. That's the name. And then you have the date, the amount. So a little, I know this is something that we talked about before, me and you specifically, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Different currencies, we actually have different columns. This was a design decision that I came up to in the end, because the reason I did that is I decided that at the end of the day, if you want one column for your transactions, you can create that yourself with a new formula field with whatever conversion rate you want to go by. I know people actually use different conversion rates from the bank conversion rate, or they think about their money in one currency.
Right.
The basic idea with Fintable is that we sync the raw data there, and then after that, we assume you're an Airtable nerd, and then you'll do your magic from there.
Okay.
Because everybody thinks about their money in a different way. Some people, use Canadian dollars and US dollars, and they prefer to see everything in Canadian
Yeah.
as the final amount.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what I'm understanding is that every transaction here, you're gonna pull in the native currency, right? And if it's in CAD, if it's in USD, and then folks can transfer it to whatever currency they want. They can create a formula field, and you associate it to the right account, right? So if I go into accounts, I can see all of those linked records around transactions. So for now, I mean, I see why you hit it because you can get to hundreds of linked records, right? But I have 2 transactions in the savings account. I have 1 transaction in the what is a CD, composite direct. I don't know what a CD is. Certificate of deposit. I hope people don't still buy those. And I also see a balance, right? So this is the latest balance as of the last successful syncing.
As of the last successful update, which is not necessarily the last successful.
Okay, it could be like,
So
from 2 days ago.
yeah, there's 2 syncs that happen, right? So one is that Plaid sends me the data, sends Fintable, and then the second is that Fintable sends it to Airtable.
Got
So the
it.
last successful update, the last time that both of these things happen
Got it.
successfully, because it might Fintable is up, but your bank is not talking to Plaid right now, which actually happens a lot.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So, and then here it's like, maybe I'll talk about how I use this, and like Sean as a personal, like what I really liked is that ability to like categorize transactions, right? So I can create a single select that's really custom to like the way I view my, my categories, right? Some people will put like essentials and rent, and all of that is in one. Some people want to split rent versus interest, or and just get a sense of where their money is going. So what I'd love is like, let's do a few of those just to create a dashboard of an example of what people could do from like the personal side. And then we'll talk about what if I'm a big business and like I receive large transactions and I want to work with those and create workflows. So I'd love to know in the chat, like, what are your categories, right? Maybe I'll start like, how have you seen people kind of categorize, create category base and make internal automation to auto categorize? Okay, we could, if we have time at the end, we'll do it, because that's also how I did it at the let's not, I'm getting excited. I appreciate the suggestion. I want to start small and then we'll build from there. So how have you seen people categorize?
Yeah, so before I actually do that, I wanted to talk about the customizability. This
Sure,
is something that very few people. So you see the difference. Notice that there's some fields which have 2 stars and some fields which have 1 star.
Right.
What that means is the field with 1 star, Fintable won't touch if you change. And so the name of your accounts and the name of your transactions, you're free to go in there and change it and update it.
Got it.
And Fintable won't touch it after that.
Got it.
You're free to update it, because this notes field is actually an auto categorization algorithm by Plaid, but they're not 100% accurate. It's a machine learning algorithm, and you're free. So that's the reason I put it in the notes field there, because you're free to make your own decision.
And do you usually see people kind of, because I can't like create a single select based off of this. So how do people kind of go, because I maybe it's just me, I really like that. Like, I like the fact that it gives me a tip. So like travel and taxi, I would be like, oh, that's transportation, right? So do people create a formula field here, a single select? What have you seen as like the best way to do this?
Yeah, so what I've seen is that people use the raw data here to come up with their own categorization algorithm. That's one of the advantages of using Airtable for finances as opposed to a custom budgeting app, because you're not free to program the app the way you like. Maybe you make your decisions based on the transaction name, or maybe you make it based on the notes. It's up to you how you want it.
So
a multi-select, single select, it's
yeah,
up to you.
I would just caution folks, if you like the way this also has, it's a two-edged sword, if you were two-sided sword. I don't know how to say that, but so essentially, like, if you do a multi-select, you can't create like good pie charts, right? Or you can't create good graphs because it becomes difficult. There's no like one category we can put it in. So let's try with the single select, and we'll call this category. And we'll do.
Okay, so I would.
You would recommend what?
Go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
no, I'm messing up here. Tell me.
No, you're doing right. I thought you were editing the notes field.
No,
You
no, I
actually
got it.
already knew.
Okay, so I saw here like food, transport. Let me know in the chat if there's some ideas like bank,
Rent.
rent, rent, housing, right? Essentials. That feels like a good first, and we could kind of add to that from there, right? So this looks like transport, and you can create a formula field here. So right, if includes travel or
Or not a main.
taxi, yeah. Payment credit card, that one is okay. So that's interest. So I'm gonna put that under essential for now. Let's give all of these essential. What is recreation? So we haven't had a fun category. Let's put this into like fun automations. Yeah. So let's get people want automations in here. So we'll get to that.
That's where it gets cool, right? Because that's the kind of thing you only get with, well, I don't know about a lot of personal budgeting, but only business budgeting apps like QuickBooks allow for auto categorization based on name.
Right.
But that's kind of one thing.
So how would you recommend folks auto categorize? Because there's a few ways in the chat. Some people are mentioning like create a separate table. You mentioned automations. What would you recommend for, hey, I want every time touchstone climbing comes in, I want it to be fitness or fun.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect use case for an automation. So if you have something like that where every time a certain transaction happens, I want it to be auto categorized, I would say let's create an automation for that.
Okay. So
Right?
Do you want to walk me through it? Do you want to do it? Walk me through. So you put the name of the name of the vendor as the primary field, and what we want is to categorize each vendor under one of these categories, right? So let's say we do another McDonald's transaction. We wanted to associate to a McDonald's vendor, which is restaurant. So before we do the automation, I would recommend like walking through it manually, and then we'll do an automation to show folks how it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've actually never created an auto categorization.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So essentially, let's create a vendor table. So I'm happy that you're learning something too. So we're gonna have a vendor category, right? And let's say that transaction, the McDonald's one, right? We want to say, okay, every time McDonald's is in the primary field, go ahead and put it under restaurant, right? So I need a vendor that is McDonald's that's written the exact same way, right? Boom. Oops. There should be McDonald's. Let me make sure I'm writing it the right way because it's going to be a primary field. It has to match. There we go. What's going on? Okay, that's weird. It's kind of copy pasting the wrong thing. There we go. Am I writing that right? McDonald's large D. Perfect. Okay. And then I want to associate every time McDonald's comes up with a category. So let's say instead of category status, we're going to call this type, right? And let's say we have food, rent, and I don't know, essentials. I don't know. We can copy paste that single select we had before. Let's not give them colored options. And then McDonald's is always food, right? Makes sense so far? And now we want to do is associate every transaction to the right vendor. So let me close this out. Just contain the word. Okay, really? Okay, that's interesting. We can try that out. So I would then create a vendor table here. So we're going to link to the vendors, right?
Oh. So far, so good.
And what I'm doing is I'm just copy pasting this value into the vendor. So then it matches to McDonald's because that already exists, right? So now I have that McDonald's transaction. And now I just want to look up the type. So here, I'm going to look up, so type boom. And I'm going to look up vendor, and I'm going to look up type, create field. And now I have that auto categorization.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
All McDonald's. And this is actually one thing that I wanted to, it's kind of missing from the bare bones template, but this is actually something really cool. The vendor field that you talked about, notice that in the name, it might be mixed up with other, like for example, it might not appear exactly as the
Right.
word McDonald's all the time. You may have other things in the name there, but Plaid actually provides a cleaned up version of the vendor name. And all you need to do to get that information into Airtable, I'm pretty sure I added it to the template this morning, but you create another field, star vendor.
Okay, I won't do it because my computer's a little slow, but in the template, star vendor will give you like the cleaned up name of McDonald's. But I just want to show folks how this is going to come in today. So let's say there's a new transaction, right? There's a new transaction that comes in and it's like another McDonald's one. The way you're going to pipe it in is like this, right? You're not going to create that link to the vendor. So we can use Airtable automations to do that automatically. Matches conditions. Since you're creating by API, every net new record, you can go ahead and have it when record is created. I won't be doing that, so I'm just kind of always when record matches conditions. And let's say our condition is going to be that the play transaction ID is not empty, right? So that way we know it's going to trigger every time. And then where vendor or a transaction, I think.
Yeah, this is actually great because you can see where name contains instead of where name matches. Which is
Yeah, exactly. You can auto categorize as well in that way, and that was one of the suggestions in the chat. Is not empty. Let's run the test. Right. So which record? I'm not sure which record it's going to pull up. Deposit. That's a bad one,
yeah.
But it's okay. We'll use it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. Okay, and then we want to
update the record.
We want to update the record. I was like, oh man, what do I have to do here? We want to update the record, and we want to
update.
In the transactions, the record ID is going to be the one we just picked.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's the one.
And then the field is going to be vendor.
Right.
And we're going to pull in the name like that. So if it doesn't exist, it's going to create it, which it will now. And if it does exist, it's going to go ahead and associate it to the right one. So let's go ahead and run a test. So now if all went well, we should see vendor, CD initial deposit, right? Which isn't a good example. So let's turn this on. Let's go ahead and add that McDonald's transaction one more time. But exactly like you would, right, like this. So this is the data that comes in for you. So we're going to add a record. Let's copy paste. There we go. And that should run the automation. And then we have McDonald's automatically linked. And boom, we also have food automatically categorized. And now we have two vendors and two transactions related to McDonald's. Woo!
I see. Just one thing here, Aaron.
Yeah.
So this works for any transaction, based whatever the name might be.
Yep.
This automation. So that's okay. I mean, I guess you could do that, but that's assuming that the name of every transaction is the vendor.
Right.
Right. But we would have a star vendor field where you could do that. Or what I would actually do, if I was auto-categorizing this, is I would create a separate rule for each vendor, because I would say the vast majority of my transactions might not be auto-categorized.
Right.
But I know that there's a rule. Like everything that comes from Madison Bicycle Shop should,
right.
I don't know, go into category. Rather than using the row name in the vendor field, I would actually manually type the vendor name that I've chosen.
Right. The only thing is you have a 25 automation limit, right? So if you're more than 25, right, you would need one automation for each categorization. And so you're right. If it just says contains McDonald's, put it into food, If it contains, your favorite place, like the rent, I do agree with you, like that is easier. Personally, the way I've set this up with your is actually like this, right? Where I like two things about this. I like the fact that I can categorize at the vendor level, and I did think use vendor. What I like selfishly, what I like a lot is like seeing how often I go somewhere, right? So like I like that idea of like looking and be like, okay, I'm going to McDonald's way too much, right? I need to slack on the McDonald's. Uh, uh, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I totally get
Oh, there's
the
actually no. You're right. Someone in the chat is actually correcting me. You could do when record matches condition, and you could do or here, right? So
oh,
you can have your mapping of vendors. You're totally right. So that actually I'm sorry, I messed up here. This is actually might be a better route here where you say if contains McDonald's or contains, and I think there's like a pretty high limit here. So you could have 10, 15, like one-offs, and it does save you that the separate table, right? And does do it
yeah,
automatically. So this is actually like a really good route as well.
right. Um, yeah, just to put it out there, auto categorization is something I'm thinking of building straight into Fintable itself to get around the automation limits, just because we have full API access and it's a lot more powerful that way.
Right.
But I'm sort of getting more feedback on the personal finance use case, first of all.
Yeah. And so if anyone has any suggestions, right? So if you're building out your template and you've built it in a certain way, feel free to share with Isa. I think it's fintable.io, got your email. And I'm sure you would love to see it just to see how people are doing this. Because if you kind of bring it in, you lose a little bit of that flexibility, right? Like I like the fact that I can control my categorization. Mind you, if you do it for me, I'll probably be happy as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the way I think about it is, if this is going to benefit more than more than one person, it's like this is not a custom to your Airtable, and it will save a lot of folks time and automations. If especially if you're on the free plan, then of course we'll go ahead and do that. And in fact, I've actually done that for certain use cases.
Awesome. So I think I hope people get a sense of like how this can be used for a personal sense. I was going to build a dashboard, right? But like relatively easy. You just add an app. You can just create a chart, right? And you can just create a pie chart based on that categorization, right? So very easy. I'm just going to do it really quickly, right? So once you have everything tagged, you can go ahead and do that. If I include empty cells, you'll notice that most of them are empty, but then you can get a sense of how much you're spending per category. So here I'm just going to go ahead and sum on the USD amount. Do I have any? Why doesn't it work?
So
Oh, because it's a currency. It's not a. It's a text field.
no. So no, that's right. Wait 1 second. I was just doing that just a few seconds ago. So click count instead of yes. Some.
Okay.
Oh, why? Because most of the number. Oh, there you go.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. So we'll leave it at this. So this will give you an idea of how you're kind of tracking in terms of expenses. We'll leave this in the template. I want to talk about
All right.
workflows around transactions.
Now, before we get that, I want to show you one really cool use case for Fintable, and this was actually one of my cases. And this will benefit anybody, personal, business, no matter who you are. One of the features that some banks offer, but not all, is a daily email notification of yesterday's transaction. And some banks offer that, some don't. If you have all of your transactions coming into one place like Airtable, you can set up a weekly or daily digest of those transactions every day or every morning. And for me, that's like one of the most obvious use cases.
Should we build it? Do you want to build it? Okay.
Because let's say, for example, send a weekly digest of all of my transactions, or even a weekly digest of your account balances.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree. Let me know in the chat if you've got that set up. So we want to. Sorry, I got into it before. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna at a scheduled time once a week, every day. Then we're gonna trigger this automation. What that automation is gonna do is find all transactions in the past X, which is variable, past day, past week, past month, whatever you want, right? So it's going to find those records that are transaction date is in the time frame that we want, right? And then send an email with that information as a summary. So the timing on this was very good because we just launched that functionality, that kind of digest functionality. So at a scheduled time, let's say on days of the week,
I would recommend daily just because the email would look very long for weekly transactions.
right, especially
Because
for rich people like you. Is that where you got a lot of transactions? I agree. I get a daily email as well, and weekly it feels like too much to get through, and daily is good, right? I like to know like, oh, this makes sense.
yeah, it's just an alert because I just scan through it quickly in the morning. It's like if there's something I don't recognize, it's like wait did that come
Right,
out? Yeah.
right. Okay, so here what we want to do is we're now every day at 1 p.m. Maybe do it a little in the morning, right? It's kind of like a good email in the morning, right? Just again. And then what we want to do is go ahead and find all records that match a certain condition. So this is actually
Yes.
tricky because where date
Right.
is yesterday, easy.
There you go.
That was much easier than I thought. Let's get okay. We have one transaction. This United Airlines, as if we're still flying. So let's run that test. We should find that one, if all went well. Yeah. Okay. So it found that one, and then what we want to do is to send an email, right? So let's send a Gmail. How do we feel? I like this new picker. It looks nice. I like the picker. It changed. This is what happens when you spend a lot of time in Airtable. You recognize those little things. So let me go and send myself an email. Yeah, so someone actually, some tips. Monthly report of all income expense balances by creating a table for monthly expenses. That's totally right. You can kind of have like almost an income sheet as well. So really like the world is your oyster. So this is what you spent. This is what you spent yesterday. Fool.
This is the point that got posted yesterday would be the more accurate thing because with credit cards sometimes things don't get posted until several days later. But
I put fool in my title. I'm not too worried around precise. This is what you spent, but actually maybe not yesterday. Definitely, I would love an email of tomorrow's expenses if you can set that up for me. That way I can avoid the ones I don't want, right?
you know what? We'll probably have to apply some machine learning.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I will fund your company if you do that. I will subscribe to it. I will pay you.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we want from there is like go into step 2, which I just did, right? So in the body of the email, we go into step 2, and when you're using a find records action, you can actually go ahead and add it as a list or as a grid. I want it as a grid, and then I could pick which fields I want to include in that kind of grid. Name, field sense, date, I know it's yesterday, USD, account, and then, actually I can have that type automatically inputted if I don't. Insert. There we go. What did I miss? Oh, I don't think I have my Gmail. Oh, I do have my Gmail account. Okay, run test. That seemed like it worked. Let me go into I'm just gonna hide you guys while I go into my email. There we go. And what we should get there is an email with yesterday's transactions. And some folks in the chat mentioned that you could have a monthly. Let me get you guys back here. Nope. There we go. Okay. 6,500 unread emails. Very nice. One day I'll get to inbox 0. And here we go. We got our daily email. So this is going to come in every day with all of yesterday's or every transaction that was posted yesterday.
That was posted yesterday. Yeah.
Awesome. Super, super cool. Okay. We got 5 minutes here. What is our last thing we want to cover? Isa, what is another use case? What have you seen people do here?
So weekly. So this actually goes right into it. So one of the big use cases is that if you have a business where something needs to be done on a transaction, you have a to-do item that needs to be done. This is, and it needs to connect to other data in your Airtable. This is where Fintable actually becomes indispensable, hopefully. So no, I can say that pretty confidently actually, because I mean, our enterprise plan starts at $500 a month, and we do have multiple customers on
That's
that.
great.
So
That's great to hear. Okay, so let me say that back. So imagine I have this. I want to like understand this 5,000, right? So maybe I want to match it to an existing invoice. I want to reach out to the customer, right? So like what I'm hearing from you is like there might be steps related to a certain transaction or a certain transaction type.
right. And what those steps are, it's totally dependent on your business. For example, you can, for investment banking, it may be cap table management. Each wire transfer that comes in has got to update the cap table and
Right.
issue stock. Well, that's one big use case. Could be invoice reconciliation, which is probably more common for everyday businesses.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've seen like entire jobs posted on Upwork and where people get hired to do this one thing, which is copy all the transactions into Airtable and then reconcile the invoices.
Yeah. You've
But
even
with
saved
Fin,
a marriage. Someone said they track their expenses in Fintable and save the
oh
marriage.
wow,
So if the thing doesn't work out, you'll at least have that as a trophy, and you save someone's marriage.
wow, now that makes everything totally worth it. That's
Awesome. So
so hard.
how have you seen people do this kind of like, okay, you mentioned like we have this cleared field. So
Yeah,
do they like manually identify and then create action items based off of like we need to do something off of this transaction?
I don't think we need to create action items in Airtable. Basically, the people who do this generally know their work very well, and they know exactly what needs to. For many people, a simple cleared flag is enough. So I really love this workflow. It just group the records by cleared.
Right. Okay. So
And,
let's kind of create a new view that is like reconciliation
or cleared,
or
whatever.
cleared. Yeah, even better. Cleared. Right. So right now what you're saying is group it by that check mark, right? So
And
essentially,
so if you're a controller, if you're a controller that works at this company, and we do have like customers which have entire departments which are controlling transactions at companies as they come in. What you want to do is, this is your workflow every morning. You come in and you look at all your transactions, and then you do whatever needs to be done for each transaction. Update your cap table,
right.
reconcile it with match it with the vendor, whatever needs to be done, and then you click clear, and you know that you have a to-do workflow.
Yeah.
So this is the advantage of something like Airtable specifically over something like QuickBooks. So with QuickBooks, okay, I mean, obviously, they're the industry standard in financial reports and so forth. I wouldn't say this is a replacement for QuickBooks. You have that for your accounting needs. But at the end of the day, if your business needs to do something more than just accounting at the end of the day with your transactions, then you need, and it's directly connected to your Airtable data and your core workflow. This is where something like Airtable and Fintable becomes indispensable.
All the tables, the merging
Right.
of Airtable, Power Table, Fintable, just all the tables, and it's just going to be the master workflow.
Exactly. You already know, Aaron, you already know very well that there are entire businesses that are run on top of Airtable, warehouses, inventories, like cattle farms, and like all of that. Now, if there is a situation where the actual transactions on your bank account are connected to data that is elsewhere in your Airtable, this is
Think Fintable.
where
Great.
yeah, where
This I'll end here. Like my excitement around this is not as much like an ad. Like I really think this is super powerful, and like for me, having done this professionally, almost I used to work in finance. Like this is a lot of people's jobs, right? Like just going and trawling through transactions. Maybe you have thousands of transactions every day and you want to like assign them to people. Maybe you want to create a collaborator field, be like, you need to check this, right? Or when I check mark, send it to this other system. Like I worked at somewhere where I had four different systems for different transactions, different departments. You want to expense and give codes, whatever. I really do think the possibilities are endless when you get like a flexible software like Airtable and then that ability to pipe in the hard part, which is those transactions. So I am very, very bullish. I'm excited to see what people build on top of Fintable, and yeah, like just reach out to Isa. I'm gonna drop his email. We haven't even talked about sync tables. That's right, Sean. Like if you're multiple departments and you want to sync to like their transactions to that department who have a different workflow, you can do that from one place, right? So like, hey, we get thousands, we assign departments to every transaction and then have them validated by that department, right? Sync tables. So no one gets visibility into other people. Like truly, truly, I think the possibilities are endless. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see what everyone builds on top of Airtable and Fintable together. And yeah, really appreciate you all joining. Thank you, Isa, for joining. And yeah, sorry for that technical issue in the middle, but really appreciate all of your patience. And yeah, any parting words?
No, just I am absolutely blown away by seeing what you guys build on top of Fintable. Like I said, this was just a little niche tool for my personal finances. I'm just absolutely blown away by the actual possibilities. And this actually says a lot more about Airtable than it does about me. It's like I sync the data there, and once the data is there, the world's your oyster. So excited to see what you guys build.
Yeah, the world is I think it's a good place to start. The world is your oyster. So with that, I will end it here today. Thanks, Penny, Sean, Millie for joining. Next week, we're going to build a portal on top of Airtable with Yohei, a VC, and how Yohei uses Airtable to give visibility into the cap table of different companies and create an LP portal. But if you're not a VC, that's totally fine. It's really going to be about how to give visibility into your Airtable bases using like a logged in portal, which will be built on top of Softer. So yeah, really appreciate all of you joining. Thank you again, Isa, for joining. And I will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.